Blue lights flashed across the reeds by my backyard creek, except they were not police lights. They were dollar store strobes zip-tied to a rake. I stood on my deck, sipping my morning coffee, trying to process what I was seeing. A woman in a navy windbreaker was waving what looked like a badge in my direction. I squinted. That was not a badge. It was a bottle opener shaped like a sheriff's star. She squared her shoulders, placed her hand on a plastic holster clipped to her belt, and announced in a voice that could cut glass, by authority vested in me by the Watershed Patrol. I nearly choked on my coffee. 10 minutes later she would faint onto my stepping stones when I told her I owned the actual Watershed. My name is Nolan Mercer. I am a software engineer, a chronic porch reader, and an enthusiastic ignorer of neighborhood email chains. I bought a cedar-sided ranch on the edge of Sycamore Glen about 2 years ago, drawn by the quiet and the narrow creek that threads between backyards like a silver ribbon. The neighborhood is peaceful enough, except for one glaring exception. Our HOA president, Beatrice Klein, has the posture of a stop sign and the temperament of a hornet trapped in a mason jar. She runs the Sycamore Glen Architectural Committee like it is a frontier fort under siege. My crimes according to her growing list include hanging a wind chime, stringing a hammock between 2 maples, and committing the unforgivable sin of enjoying the creek without filing Form 14B, which she calls the Seasonal Water Feature Appreciation Request. I did not even know that form existed until she left 3 copies in my mailbox, each one progressively more highlighted. The notes began arriving shortly after I moved in. Lime green paper tucked into my mailbox, stuffed into my boots on the porch, and once folded into a loaf of zucchini bread like an artisanal subpoena. The messages were vague but threatening. Unapproved riparian activity, one read. Suspicious algae vibe, claimed another. I laughed them off at first, thinking someone was playing a prank. Then Beatrice started timing my lawn mowing sessions with a laser thermometer, claiming I was generating excessive heat that could disturb migratory birds. I did not have the heart to tell her that the birds in question were Canada geese, and they were disturbed by nothing short of a tornado. She began documenting everything. I would see her standing at her kitchen window with binoculars, watching me read on my deck. She took photographs of my hammock from multiple angles, as if it were a crime scene. One morning I found a citation on my windshield for unauthorized vehicle idling, even though my car had been parked and off for 3 hours. The citation was written on HOA letterhead she had clearly designed herself, complete with a clip art gavel and the phrase Vehicle Compliance Division in a font that looked like it came from a pirate treasure map. I kept the citation. It would become useful later. Then came the drone. A whiny little quadcopter with a GoPro duct taped to the bottom, hovering over the creek like a mechanical mosquito. Beatrice stood on the slope behind her house, shouting into a megaphone that this area was under HOA inspection. The drone buzzed low over the water, disturbing a heron that had been fishing peacefully for the better part of an hour. She accused me of water hoarding because I had placed a few stones along the bank to slow erosion. She claimed the creek fell under community jurisdiction, which was adorable considering the county owned it and the beavers upstream had been doing most of the management for the past decade. I waved at the drone. It wobbled, then crashed into a willow tree. Beatrice spent the next 20 minutes trying to retrieve it with a pool skimmer. Then Beatrice escalated from hobbies to what I can only describe as felonies in training. One Tuesday afternoon she marched down the slope toward my backyard wearing that same navy windbreaker. The letters POLITE were ironed across the back, except she had missed the C, so it just said POLITE in crooked white letters. She flashed a foil sheriff's star with a cartoon steer printed on it, the kind you get from a cereal box. She had accessorized the outfit with a flashlight on her belt, a whistle around her neck, and what appeared to be a toy walkie-talkie clipped to her shoulder. My nephew was visiting that week, and she told him, with a completely straight face, that he was under creek arrest. He was 12. He laughed. She did not. She pulled out a notepad and started writing him a citation for trespassing on HOA waterways. I walked down from the deck and calmly informed her that she was on my property, that the creek was county-owned, and that if she did not leave immediately I would call the actual police. She puffed up like an angry pigeon and told me that she was the police, at least for the purposes of HOA enforcement. She tapped her fake badge. She clicked her flashlight on and off for emphasis. Then she tried to handcuff my nephew with a pair of plastic toy handcuffs that still had the price sticker on them. That was when I took out my phone and started recording. A week later she called the county environmental hotline and reported that I had dumped chemicals into the creek. She claimed she had witnessed me pouring barrels of unknown substances into the water under the cover of darkness. This was a complete fabrication. The only thing I had poured into the creek was a bag of native wildflower seeds along the bank, which I had purchased from the county conservation office itself. Her report triggered a full environmental investigation. 2 actual county inspectors showed up the next morning, clipboards in hand, along with Deputy Halvorson, a patient man with the demeanor of a Labrador and the eyebrows of a thunder god. Beatrice was waiting for them in her driveway, wearing her POLITE jacket and holding a binder she labeled evidence of ecological terrorism. She tried to deputize the inspectors on the spot, offering them laminated badges she had made at a print shop. Deputy Halvorson wrote something on his clipboard that made her hiccup nervously and take 3 steps back. The inspectors tested the water. They inspected my stones. They found nothing wrong. In fact, they complimented my erosion control efforts and asked if I would be willing to give a presentation at the next county conservation meeting. That is when I decided to stop being the creek goblin and become the main character in this ridiculous saga. 3 months before any of this started, I had attended a county surplus auction out of boredom and curiosity. They were selling off neglected parcels of land, most of them patches of brush and rocks nobody wanted. One listing caught my eye. Watershed Parcel C-117. A narrow strip of land upstream from my property, overgrown with invasive species but officially designated as part of the county watershed system. I bought it for less than the cost of a decent kayak. Then I filed a conservation easement with the county, applied for a small grant to remove the invasive plants, and received letters of support from the county conservation office. In doing so, I acquired riparian rights to that section of the creek. Rights that, as it turned out, trumped any HOA cosplay authority Beatrice could dream up. When the county inspectors finished their assessment and praised my erosion control stones, I invited them, Deputy Halvorson, and 3 HOA board members to a polite meeting on my patio. Beatrice arrived 10 minutes early, clipboard in hand, wearing a smirk you could use to scrape ice off a windshield in January. I let everyone settle into their chairs, poured iced tea, and then pulled out a stamped deed from a folder on the table. Miss Klein, I said calmly, I do not just have permission to touch the creek. I own the watershed upstream that feeds it. Her face went blank. I explained the easement. I explained the grant. I explained the letters of support from the county conservation office and the riparian rights that came with Parcel C-117. I passed around copies of the documentation. The HOA board members leaned in to read. One of them, a retired accountant named Gerald, let out a low whistle. Then I mentioned that her drone, the one she had been flying over my property for weeks, had been filmed trespassing over that parcel. I had security cameras. I had timestamps. I had video of her standing in her yard with the remote control, directing the drone over land I legally owned. I also pointed out that her POLITE jacket, combined with her fake badge, her toy handcuffs, and her attempts to exercise false authority over my nephew and myself, qualified as impersonation of a law enforcement officer under state law. I slid a printed copy of the relevant statute across the table. Deputy Halvorson nodded slowly. The inspectors nodded. The HOA treasurer made a soft whimpering sound, the kind of noise you make when you are doing insurance math in your head and realizing your premiums are about to skyrocket. Beatrice's face cycled through several colors. White, pink, red. Then back to white. She gripped the edge of the table. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on a dock. She tried to argue. She said the HOA bylaws gave her authority over all common areas. I pointed out that the creek was not a common area. She said I was threatening her. I pointed out that I was simply stating facts and that Deputy Halvorson was present as a witness. She said this was all a misunderstanding. Deputy Halvorson cleared his throat and mentioned that he had received multiple complaints about her behavior, not just from me, but from 4 other residents who had been too intimidated to come forward until now. Beatrice opened her mouth, probably to declare some kind of maritime law or claim squatters' rights on behalf of the ducks. Instead, she swayed slightly, whispered the word watershed like it was a new zodiac sign she had just discovered, and collapsed gently onto my time border. Her clipboard clattered onto the stone path. Deputy Halvorson called for medical assistance, though she came to within about 30 seconds, confused and disoriented. When her vision cleared, Deputy Halvorsen was holding a notice of violation in front of her face. It had her name on it. Consequences rippled through Sycamore Glen faster than spring runoff. Beatrice was charged with impersonating an officer and unlawful harassment. The charges were filed within 48 hours. She hired a lawyer, a man with a bad comb-over and a worse understanding of property law, who tried to argue that HOA authority superseded county jurisdiction. The judge was not amused. Beatrice received 1 year of probation, a restraining order that prohibited her from coming within 50 feet of my property line, which extended all the way to the far side of my birdbath, and 50 hours of community service. Ironically, her community service involved removing trash from local waterways, which turned out to be my very creek, under county supervision. She would spend every Saturday morning for the next 6 months in an orange safety vest, supervised by a county ranger, picking up candy wrappers and soda cans from the banks of the very creek she had tried to control. The HOA insurance company, suddenly allergic to cosplay cops and potential lawsuits, forced sweeping reforms. No more drones without explicit county permits. No more fake badges or uniforms that could be confused with law enforcement. An audit of all violation fees collected over the past 3 years, which revealed that Beatrice had been pocketing nearly 30% of the fines into a personal account she called the Community Improvement Discretionary Fund. That discovery triggered a separate investigation. The board was furious. The residents were furious. Even the people who had supported her initially began to distance themselves, claiming they had no idea what she was doing. Beatrice was voted off the board in an emergency meeting held on a Thursday night in the community center. The room was packed. Every seat was filled, and people stood along the walls. I sat in the back, arms crossed, watching. The vote was not even close. 43 residents voted to remove her immediately. 2 voted to keep her, both of them her next-door neighbors who probably feared retaliation. When the results were announced, Beatrice stood up from her chair at the front table, face bright red, mouth hanging open in shock. She looked around the room as if waiting for someone to say it was all a joke, that this was some kind of prank or misunderstanding. Nobody did. The room was silent except for the sound of folding chairs creaking and someone coughing in the back row. She grabbed her binder, clutched it to her chest like a shield, and walked out of the community center without saying a word. The door swung shut behind her with a soft click.